Hi everyone, this is Mr. To here and welcome to the CSQ Skills Booster program. So we're going to start here in lesson 1 by talking about exam strategy. Now, the first thing that I will cover with you is what to do when you actually receive your exam papers, right? What I recommend you to do is to start off with reading the case study very quickly, reading the questions very quickly. So the first time you read the case study, the first time you read the question, I want you to do a speed reading. Okay, in fact, this is the sequence I will advise you to do. Speed read through the questions, speed read through the case study. Do not take more than 2 minutes to do that. Right, so do it one time first, right? Then after you have done this speed reading of both the case study and the questions in under 2 minutes, then the next time around, right, you are going to do a thorough reading of the questions. So when you do a thorough reading of the question, you actually scan through the details of the questions, what exactly needs to be answered for each question. Then read the case study again. Okay, when you read the case study again, what I want you to do is to take out a highlighter. Alright, and then a lot of you do this thing whereby you highlight everything, all the every single sentence in the case study, like you're using it to track what you read. Don't do that. Okay, don't do that. Right? You do the thorough reading of the question because when you actually do a thorough reading of the case study, you want to highlight all the parts that you think are going to be in your answer that are going to help with answering your questions. So highlight the portions that you believe will help you with answering the question. Okay, so this is what I recommend you to do, right? If you don't really have a routine, okay, on what to do when you receive the exam paper. If you have really something that works for you, you can stick to that. Right? If you don't really have like a specific way, right, of tackling a paper the moment you receive the paper, this is what I'll advise you to do. All right. Okay, right, next, I'm going to talk to you about this framework that I teach my students. This framework that I teach my students is called the DATE framework, right? I will go through the DATE framework with you briefly now first. Right, in lesson 2 and lesson 3, we will do the DATE framework in great detail, right? But what exactly is this DATE framework? So, DATE framework stands for D, A, T, and E. Right, but this D, A, T, and E, they are not in like any specific sequence or order. Right, we just arrange it in this manner so that it's easy to remember. Right, so I'm going to go through what D, A, T, E means. Actually, usually I start first with the T, which is theory. Okay, what do we mean by theory? Whenever you're looking at a question, right, every single question must be testing you on a concept that you have learned, a theoretical concept that you have learned. Right, so one thing that you will definitely want to do, right, is to actually explain the theoretical concept that you have learned that is relevant to the answer. So you always start off with theory, at least that's what I would do. Right, then the next thing you will do is that you will use data from the case study. Right, by the way, data doesn't mean just numbers. It doesn't just mean graph, it doesn't just mean tables, right? Data is everything from the case. Everything from the case is actually considered data. So you want to actually use data from the case study to help with answering the question, right? So after you explain your theory, you bring in data from the case study. The third thing that we usually use is application. So application is this. So the theory that you have learned and then the data that you see in the case study, do they match? Right? Do they match? Like, does the theory that you have learned help you explain what you see in the data? Right? Sometimes it does, right? Then it links up, and then okay, it is something that you have actually learned before, and you know what you see in the data, it corresponds to what you have learned in theory, right? Sometimes it doesn't, right? The data doesn't link up with the theory at all, and then you're like quite confused, like, hey, how come the data is like that and then the theory is like that? Right, so if they are at odds with each other, then you have to do some application. Why is the data at odds with the theory that I've learned? Is there any other things that explains, right, the data? Any other concepts that we can bring in to explain the data? So that's what we call application. Then finally, we bring in evaluation. Okay, so that is what we call the DATE framework, and the DATE framework can really be applied to most questions in a case study. So you start to see that in lesson 2 and lesson 3. All right. Okay, the last thing, and most of you will know this is important, but I'm going to give you a benchmark or a rule to follow, a rule of thumb to follow, right? How are you going to do time management, right? A very easy way to do time management is to think about 1 mark being 2 minutes. right? 1 mark is 2 minutes, so 2 marks is 4 minutes, 4 marks is 8 minutes, so on and so forth. So always ration your time. If you are answering a 12 mark question, then you need 24 minutes. Okay, you need 24 minutes to answer a 12 mark question. So allocate your time properly, right? Don't go beyond the time spent, because what a lot of you end up doing is that you spend so much time answering the earlier part of the case study question, right? That you end up not spending enough time for the 10 mark questions, which you can lose a lot of marks there. So always ration your time so that you have enough time to deal with the questions at the back as well. Okay, so that is exam strategy. Now let's talk about how to revise for case study, which is a common question that's being asked by students. So they say, okay, I know how I can revise for essay, that's easy. But case study, how to revise? Is there any way of revising for case study at all? Okay, so how to get A for case study? I will say that, right, it's a mixture of all of these factors, right? You need to be able to do your time management properly. You need to be exposed to a wide range of questions. You need to gain the necessary skills, which obviously we're spending a bit of time throughout this booster program, right, to cover these skills with you. Of course, you need content, right, and then you also need to do evaluation. So these are all the factors that help you to get an A for your case study. But let's go through some brief steps that you can take, right, towards starting to revise for your case study. Okay, the first thing I will ask you to do, right, if you want to do proper revision for a case study, is to acquire the correct resources, right? So you need to get correct resources as part of a conducive environment for you to study. So what are the resources that I recommend you to have? Right, of course, no brainer, you need a copy of the A-level TYS. Right, when I say A-level TYS, I mean the question paper, not the answers, because for the answers, right, you want to actually make sure you get a good quality set of answers, which may not always be the case. So you got to make sure that you verify that the A-level TYS answers that you have are of good quality. Okay, then another thing you can do is to get past year promo papers or past year prelim papers. So out of convenience, I usually go and buy online, right? Like I think Kiasu exam papers. But I think most of your schools, you will also find this available in hard copy. So one important thing about these resources that you want to buy is that they must come with a good quality set of answers. Okay, good set of quality answers, right? You want to make sure that they have answers that you can reference and you can trust that the answers are correct. Okay, so that's the first step. You need to acquire a good set of resources that you can use during your revision. Okay, the next step, right, is to actually do one case study practice every week. Right, for effective revision, you want to actually do one case study weekly. So here's what I recommend you to do when you're doing your weekly case study practices. Right, number one, you want to time each practice. At the start, maybe you don't have to limit yourself, but at the start, what you can do is see and observe how much time you actually take to complete a case study. Usually, students spend too much time trying to complete a case study, way more than what is allowed, right? And for H2 students, right, depending on whether you're JC1 or JC2, under the old curriculum, the 2022 A-level curriculum, you have 2 hours 15 minutes to finish a H2 case study paper. Under the 2023 H2 curriculum, you have 2 hours 30 minutes to finish 2 30 marks case study. For H1 students, you have 3 hours to complete 2 times 45 mark case study. So you need to make sure that you observe to the time constraints of the examinations. Okay, the other thing that you can do is that when you are still doing your weekly revision practice, you're doing your one case study practice weekly, use all the resources you can use to help you with answering. You can use the notes that you have, you can use Google, you can use Wikipedia, you can use YouTube to help you understand specific concepts you don't understand well enough, because this is an opportunity you can take to actually do some revision as well. Then after you have done your practice, check your answers against the suggested answers. Okay, you will want to find good sources of suggested answers as model answers, right? Sometimes the model answers are not that good, so you need to make sure you got good quality answers that you can reference. Okay, lastly, using these good quality answers, you will want to be able to grade your own answers and ask yourself, hey, after I read the answer and look my own answer, how many marks do I think I deserve? Right, you need to have that scale of the ability to actually grade your own answers, right, using the answer key as a reference, so that, right, when in the future, subsequently, when you're actually consciously answering the question, you also ask yourself, hey, this point I'm writing, how many marks am I going to get, right? And that's usually quite useful. Okay, and then third, you either do self-evaluation like I mentioned, or you seek external feedback. Okay, the purpose of doing practice is not just practice, no. Like we talk about effective practice versus practice. It's important to do effective practice, and to do effective practice, right, you need to figure out, okay, what are your weaknesses. Every case study I do, I want to know what I suck at, right? What am I weak at? Right? So after each practice, you need to do self-evaluation. If you don't have the ability to do self-evaluation, then you need to seek help. Go for a consult with a tutor, a school teacher, or you go for consult with your private tutor, which in this case is me lah, right? And then talk to your friends, ask them whether they have any clue, right, about the specific part that you have a problem with, right? And then lastly, you can actually build content through answering case study questions. When you're answering questions, right, obviously some of the case study questions is testing you on content. You can make use of lecture notes and resources you have, and then to answer, to explain the concept that you have learned in a concise manner. So one way to build your own content bank is actually through answering case study questions. So you can actually gain content by answering case studies as well. All right.